The Bears are 3-2. They're 500 for the first time since December 27, 2020, which was also Mitch Trubisky's final road game with the Bears because the Bears put up about 41 points against the Jaguars last season. And hey, it's been a tale of two halves so far, it seems like, with 5 weeks in, because week one was all panic and desperation. Then weeks 2, 3, 4 came, and it was like, okay, things are beginning to stabilize. But the Bears are finally on a winning streak too, Max. And I think it's certainly exciting because while Justin Fields only threw the ball 20 times yesterday, we'll get to that in a couple minutes here. I mean, the Bears have a win. They are currently sixth in the NFC for a playoff spot, or the sixth seed if the playoffs were to start today, to phrase that better. But what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Pretty energized. I think the entire Chicago Bears team is. I think the fan base is. It was a bit of a stunner. I was incorrect. I thought that the Raiders were going to win, and Bears proved us wrong. So I'm feeling really good. There's still some glaring holes with this team, but it seems like every week they're just getting better and better on both sides of the ball, which is exactly what you want to see out of a team that we had really zero expectations for. So seeing them at 3-2, like beating the one of like the early MVP frontrunners who literally has the second most passing yards in the NFL, having him with a QBR of 20 points is great. So I'm pretty stoked. Offense, defense, things are looking good. We're going to really dive into that today. We're going to talk about Khalil Herbert. Guy came out of nowhere. Nazi Usayd and I, we've been talking about this kid for months. I've been making memes about him for months, just waiting for him ready. It's about to pop off. I think he's going to have a really good game against Packers. Maybe preface that a little bit. We'll have our breakdown later on this week. And we're going to answer the question, are the Bears a playoff team? It's way too early to say that, but we're going to talk about it anyways.
Yeah, and make sure you're following Fireside Bears on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Follow myself and Max on Twitter at Usayd Koshal and at Max Smith ESM. Honestly, when I look at this Bears team, I mean, I think the first reason that they went into Las Vegas and won is because the Bears were finally the team that was more physical at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football, on offense and defense. I know this is going viral on social media, but there's the one play where James Daniels pretty much took a Raiders linebacker up to like the second or third level and just absolutely like pancaked him into the ground and posed his will. But I think one of the big issues with the Bears over the last couple of years under Matt Nagy has been, hey, this offensive line is too soft. They're not winning enough. When it comes to the defensive side of the ball, it's like if Akeem Hicks isn't playing, it's an issue because the defensive line's getting no push, no pressures outside of guys like Khalil Mack. Side note, Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn played another awesome game yesterday, especially Khalil Mack. But just finally having that presence on the offensive line, imposing your will, is old school Chicago Bears football. It's something we're not used to. I think when you go back and you talk to guys like Alex Brown and Roberto Garza, you just listen to them speak. I mean, hey, this physical brand of football is what we as Bears fans are traditionally used to. And it was just really good seeing that yesterday against a team that is known for its physicality in the trenches, because John Gruden is an old school head coach. And John Gruden's always been of the opinion that, yeah, you know what? Things start from the inside out, and we're going to punch you in the face at the line of scrimmage on every snap of the game because it means we're going to win the game.
Yeah, that's absolutely massive. And you look at Canton, you look at the Hall of Fame, look at how many linemen are in the Hall of Fame, and then look at how many of those are Chicago Bears. It's a very important piece of the franchise historically. And also think about how many running backs, how many of the all-time great running backs for Chicago Bears. That doesn't happen without offensive linemen. That doesn't happen without tough mentality, hard-nosed football players. These are the guys in the trenches who put their hard hats on every day and just hit people. And that's what they love to do. They get paid to do it. They're supposed to be good at it. This is really exciting. For the first time in a long time, you're completely right. It seems like the Bears are aggressive, which is what they need to be. Why did the Kansas City Chiefs lose the Super Bowl? My opinion, straight up answer, they abandoned the run game and they were getting dominated. Football is an incredibly mental sport. And like you said, John Gruden is a very, very, very heavy trenches guy. He wants to push harder. He wants to show you that he's tougher than you, meaner than you. And the Raiders kind of have that mentality too because of John Gruden. But that didn't happen. It happened in the first two drives. Justin Fields was getting thrown around. Things were looking really ugly. But here's what's important. The Bears responded. After Justin was getting thrown around, illegal hits left and right, looked like there was a bounty on his head. The offensive line stepped up and they said, we're going to protect our guy and we're going to punch these guys in the mouth. And they did. Or in James Daniels' case, absolutely pile drive 369 him like he's from WWE. It was insane. But that's what's important. And that's how you build a winning team is by I'm going to hit harder than you. Guess what? You can hit me all you want, but I am going to hit harder than you. I'm going to push you out of my way. Like Jimmy Graham literally pushing Khalil Herbert like 6-7 yards. I haven't seen that out of Bears players in forever, especially not out of a guy like Jimmy Graham, who's literally there just to catch touchdowns. So there's something going around in the atmosphere where everybody's starting to buy into each other. They want to be there to protect each other. They're willing to go out of their way to do more for each other. And that is a winning formula for a football team. So it's impressive. It's good to see. And hopefully we see more of it against the Packers because you're going to need that going into this week.
Yeah, I mean, all of a sudden, this shift to physicality really plays to the Bears' strengths because, I mean, let's be honest, the weather's getting colder here in Chicago, even though it's October 11th and it's 72 degrees outside, but you guys get the point. The weather's getting colder, and what's happening is over the next couple of weeks, the Bears are playing teams that are tough at the line of scrimmage. And just tough in general. I mean, you look at Green Bay, Tampa Bay. Somewhere in there, you have Pittsburgh, who's, despite its terrible record, is always a tough opponent because of Mike Tomlin's an incredibly smart head coach. Baltimore's on the schedule. The Arizona Cardinals, the Seattle Seahawks. These tougher teams are gonna be legitimate matchups for the Bears. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that I think the Bears could certainly beat every single one of these teams, but when you look at what's happened over the last few weeks, is okay, we've seen the Packers have kind of gone down to the wire, right? With the Bengals. We've seen some of these other teams. All of a sudden, things are looking up for the Bears, but we'll discuss that in a couple minutes here. But when you talk about the physicality element, I mean, the weather's going to change, and ultimately it's going to be the toughest of the tough teams are going to win. Now, I think a third reason that the Bears won yesterday is because of a really solid running game. And this leads into our second point, too, about Khalil Herbert and Damian Williams. Look, Damian Williams played phenomenal yesterday. I'm going to say this time and time again. I was a bit skeptical when the Bears signed him because I looked at it, I'm like, wait, this guy was out of football in 2020. He is a running back. And you know, what's the shelf life for running backs? 5-6 years if you're lucky. And then you factor in the fact that he had always just been a rotational guy. Well, I think Damian Williams certainly has a lot of burst to him. He's a very underrated option as a receiver. I think yesterday he averaged 10 yards a reception. You look at Khalil Herbert, who was actually the Bears' leading rusher yesterday, had about 18, 19 carries for 75 yards. I mean, hey, look, Khalil Herbert and Damian Williams played really well. And ultimately, I know that we're in year 4 of the Matt Nagy era. And let me phrase it this way. We're in year 4 of the Matt Nagy era, and we finally figured out the Bears as a team. Hey, this is what our identity is. It's just going to be old school smash mouth football. Is it the greatest thing in a pass first league? No. But for what the Bears have on the roster right now, especially on offense, considering the situation, knowing that you need to rest the defense in order to really continue to be in games, guess what? The smash mouth football thing totally works.
Yeah, and you're right. Like it's winning games, plain and simple. We beat the Raiders, who were coming in, little dud after Monday night, but they're still coming in relatively hot. Beats the Lions, who by no means, again, they had a nail biter yesterday against the Vikings. Absolutely zero reason they should be 0-5 right now, but they are. Unfortunate. Dan Campbell cries. I don't blame him. We beat the Bengals, right? Who, again, took the Packers to the wire. Could have won that game 2 times because of our running game. So this isn't just anything to scoff at. Like, this is a legitimate way that the Bears are winning games in the Professional Football League is by pushing the pile, running it up the gut. Outside zone schemes, which were kind of missing yesterday, but they were very prevalent in the Lions. Maybe they really respected those edge rushers from the Raiders, which I don't blame them. Max Crosby, Yannick Ngakoue, Caleb Messi, they're good. They're just flat out good. So absolutely correct. Bears, if they find a winning formula, they're going to stick with it, and it's probably going to win. And you mentioned the weather, which is, we as Bear fans always understand the concept of Bears football. Even when you're growing up, you're just playing football in Illinois. If it's raining outside or it's really cold outside in like a youth football Pee Wee league or Bill George league, you say, "Oh, it's Bears weather." Like it's just a synonymous with playing football in the state of Illinois. Look at some of the games. I'm going to read some of the games that are at Soldier Field towards the end of the season. So the 49ers come over to Chicago on Halloween, starting to get a little chilly. We play over in Pittsburgh in November 8th. That's probably going to be a chilly game. The Ravens, who fortunately for them have an outdoor stadium, they're going to be playing the Bears November 21st. It's going to be a little chilly. Then Cardinals from the NFC West and beautiful Arizona, they're going to be playing in Chicago on December 5th. That is going to be a cold, cold game for the Cardinals, who are used to indoor domed stadiums and the wonderful West. So that's going to be tough, especially when you're thinking about the Arizona Cardinals relying on Kyler Murray. If the Bears can get that run game going, there's absolutely zero reason that they shouldn't at least remain competitive in that game. And then, of course, we do play the Seahawks over in Seattle on December 26th, the day after Christmas. It's going to be cold. And then the Giants and the Bears should be an absolute just frozen fest on January 2nd. So if we know the passing game isn't going to get us wins, because statistically we have the worst passing offense in the league. We don't lead the league in interceptions, but we lead the league in sacks and like least amount of passing yards. We're 31st in just about every other category, except for completion rates, by the way. We're kind of up there. But regardless, we have to rely on the run game. And if Khalil Herbert can do it, if Damian Williams, who I along with you thought he was just going to be a passing back, can do it, then there's zero reason we shouldn't run with what's rolling. And I think Bill Lazor knows that. I think this team knows that. And I think they're going to put it to test here against the Packers.
Yeah, I want to talk for a second about some of those power runs, because and some of the situational runs that the Bears had going yesterday, and this frustrated the hell out of me covering the game yesterday. I actually think I tweeted about it, and my apologies. I tweet probably 300 times on Sunday because I watch football from like 12 o'clock to Sunday night football, but that's only because to get a read on the entire league, because some of the games that are on this year, the Bears are playing every single one of those teams. Now, here's the deal. The problem with the power running and the running game yesterday is this, and I know Bears fans are going to be like, oh, you're being overly critical and nitpicky. There's still issues to iron out, like you mentioned. Okay, 3rd and 1 yesterday. You know what? There were a couple times there were 3rd and short scenarios. Guess what? In those situations, Khalil Herbert should have been the guy in the game, not Damian Williams. Khalil Herbert's a hard runner. He's compact. He's a player that has shown the ability both at Virginia Tech and now in the NFL, especially throughout the preseason. Hey, give me the ball. I will run between the tackles if you need me to. That's why you have Khalil Herbert in there. Damian Williams is more of the guy who's like the change of pace back. So putting in Damian Williams on those certain short situations, especially sometimes on the goal line, just did not work to the Bears' strengths in the fourth quarter. Those are situations where it's like, okay, you need to have Khalil Herbert in. I'm going to give the Bears the benefit of doubt here, because a lot of the running plays yesterday, especially when the Bears got inside the red zone, those we have to keep in mind were designed for who typically David Montgomery. Like in those situations, Dave Montgomery would be getting the ball. So this coaching staff did a good job yesterday of using Herbert and Williams, but they're still figuring out how to fully use Herbert to his skill set. And, I actually talked to people who covered Khalil at Virginia Tech right after he was drafted. One of the big things that they told me was, if your team needs a spark, Khalil Herbert's the guy to provide it. Now, what are the implications of this? The implications are that you have a 6th-round pick that's on a rookie contract through the 2024-2025 season. Ultimately, that means that the Bears are going to see some turnover at the running back position. I don't think Tariq Cohen's role is necessarily safe. Matt Nagy wants to use him as a receiver. Maybe the Bears do that and Tariq Cohen just never lines up in the backfield again. But hey, Khalil Herbert's a name to continue watching. And I think that when we talk about what is already expected to be an incredibly talented rookie class, because we haven't even seen Daz Newsome or Thomas Graham Jr., two very high upside players, play yet. What will happen is Khalil Herbert, I think, is going to be the guy that when this 21-21 season's done, he's going to be the rookie that walks away with an instant impact.
Right. Yeah. When I see Khalil Herbert, when we actually absolute diamond of a pick in the 6th round. The PFF draft guide, everyone likes to trash on PFF, but the PFF draft guide was incredibly high on Khalil Herbert. They were a little stunned that he fell so far. Anybody who scouted Khalil Herbert was a little stunned that he fell that far. But the Bears were very happy to pick him up. And I'm seeing kind of shades of 2018 with Jordan Howard and David Montgomery. Now, I'm not going to say that David Montgomery is Jordan Howard this year by any means. But it is comfortable knowing that we're seeing a rookie running back who was taken, mid to late rounds. David Montgomery was taken in the mid to late round. That's coming in and doing his job perfectly well, and is showing shades of the guy that he's basically been selected to replace. It's crazy to me. When you look at Khalil Herbert, you look at what makes him good. He has the same exact skill set as David Montgomery. Their vision is fantastic. Their burst is great. Their ability to extend the run after yards after contact is elite. But here's why I like Khalil Herbert so much is he's already faster than where David Montgomery was his first year. Khalil Herbert they call him juice for a reason. This dude returned kicks and punts like nobody's business while he was in college at Virginia Tech. Absolutely insane. Go back and watch some of his ACC highlights when he's literally returning kicks for touchdowns. That David Montgomery never did that. And he couldn't do that because he didn't have that late game speed. Khalil Herbert does. He's incredibly shifty, elusive back, but he's the ability to run you over and carry you for extra yards. That's what makes me like him so much. Now, he's not as refined as a runner as David Montgomery is at this point. I'm not out here saying replace David Montgomery to Khalil Herbert. I'm saying Khalil Herbert is a raw but great talent right now that needs to see more touches because he's just going to develop into an even better back. So if David Montgomery, God forbid, leaves the Bears within a couple of years, he's more than likely going to be here for another 2 or 3 years. Khalil Herbert's right there. And eventually you'll see the transition going, in my opinion. I think that's a wonderful passing of the baton. But of course, we need to see more out of him than just an overreaction after one good game against the Raiders defense. But go ahead.
Well, I was going to say this, since we're speaking of these running backs, I mean, going to be honest, okay? Damian Williams is on a 1-year deal, but he's flashed enough to possibly warrant earning a second contract with the Bears. And then you talk about some of the lower end options. I mean, I know people are under the assumption I hate Ryan Nall. I understand Ryan Nall's impact on special teams, and I also see the grin on your face because I know we're arguing about this in the chat. But here's my whole thing, okay? You look at this running back position. It's very clearly shown it's basically the strength of the offense at this point. But that's because you have guys like Herbert, Williams, and Montgomery. And we're not even talking about Tariq Cohen, who hasn't even played it down in 2021 yet. That's because those guys have done a phenomenal job of getting the job done. And guess what? All three of those guys flash way more potential than some of these lower end guys. But what bothers me about the running back room, and this isn't me being a Debbie Downer because it is a valid point, is just there's players like Ryan Nall that this coaching staff just seemingly continues to keep around. And ultimately, when you look at a guy like Ryan Nall, it's like, has the guy had his bright spots? Yeah. But the issue comes in where he's still on this roster, but he's never really pushed for any legitimate playing time in a regular season game. And it's just like, hey, what is this coaching staff going to realize that, okay, look, it's time to stop keeping around preseason stars and start bringing in players that have legitimately proven themselves. I mean, it would actually be better if the Bears moved on from a guy like Ryan Nall and then went ahead and kept a guy like, or gave those valuable reps to a guy like Artavius Pierce. Also, other note, by the way, and I'm going to cut this up and promote on Twitter, you can use Ryan Nall as a fullback. That's fine. You can use him as a fullback. That's fine. But then you also have to give someone, or what's the reasoning and what's the justification for using guys like JP Holtz and Jesse James as fullbacks too? Because the Bears have used both of those players as fullbacks. And as a fullback in power running games, it's all about size. All right. And I would much rather have a tight end out there and a bigger guy that's going to impose his will against a smaller defender, or a guy that's just about the size of a defensive lineman every single time, compared to basically a running back who's like whatever 6'1", 6'2".
Well, maybe even Alex Bars. I mean, that's what Bill Lazor is trying to figure out. He's using, how do we put Alex Bars in this offense? And he did it. Crazy, interesting power jumbo formation there by moving Bars around. He was essentially a fullback in that formation, like an extra just blocker that was there to help the lead block and set the inside positioning. That's something that's incredibly interesting moving forward. Is the Bears do have a plethora of big guys. They're not biggest, but we have 5 tight ends on the roster for a reason. And another one of those preseason superheroes that the Bears love keeping around, Jesper Horsted, continues to show little shades of why he's on the roster. I'll go ahead and give credit where credit's due. It's a touchdown, his second in the regular season. Justin Fields' first. It was kind of a weird read to me. I thought Cole Kmet was more open on the under, but Justin saw it. He flinged it. It was a touchdown, so I can't be upset about that. But a lot of these players, a lot of these tight ends were brought in to be used in the passing game. And Matt Nagy last week said, I like tight ends. Tight ends are great. Well, we saw tight ends heavily used in 2018 with Mitch Trubisky. Trey Burton was Mitch's favorite target by far. Some of the biggest plays that year were through the hands of Trey Burton. So it makes really little to no sense for a Bears offense that's big on tight ends, that has a bunch of pass catching tight ends, to not use them outside of extra blockers in the run game. But that might be a statement towards Matt Nagy's passing plays, his passing formations. It's tough to get guys in the spread offense going that are used to lining up as wise or lining off as flex tight ends. That's what I'm looking for. Lining up on the flex right off their tackle. It's a little difficult to get those guys going. So maybe we'll see that more under Bill Lazor. We're already seeing more 12 personnel, which is fantastic because it works. We've been saying that for weeks, especially with the run game. And oh my God, giving Justin Fields protection to throw the ball. What a concept. But yeah, no, I mean, like there's a lot going on with this running game. You could watch this tape for hours and look at the nuance and differences because just watching it live, I could tell that this was a new playbook. Like this is a completely different playbook. There are like 4 or 5 or 6 different formations that I saw that weren't in the past 3 weeks, which tells me that somebody is taking over this offense and is introducing new formations, new packages, new sets. Maybe that's the difficult discussion that they had when Matt Nagy says that the offensive staff had a difficult conversation. Maybe the conversation was, hey, Matt, we're going to run with a completely different playbook in week 3 or week 3 after week 3. Is that okay? Well, actually, we're not asking if that's okay. We're just going to do it, okay? And here we are, and it's working. So I'm not complaining.
Yeah, like I said, though, I mean, one of the things that irritates me is that these guys that have been here for, and this is totally justified with me being irritated. It's like these guys, some of these preseason stars, like, okay, look, Jesper Horsted played phenomenal yesterday. I understand he had the 3 touchdowns. I understand that, you know what, being a bigger player, Jesper Horsted, being like 6'3", 6'4", 250, I think Jesper Horsted certainly tries to play bigger than he is. And by the way, let me just say this, okay? Horsted's emergence is coming at the right time because the Bears are finally in a position where it's like, okay, when they do move on from Jimmy Graham in 2022, hopefully, instead of asking him to take another pay cut, which is probably going to happen now that I said it, knowing the way this team thinks, what will happen is that Horsted's going to be waiting in the wings to take the next step. But then on the other hand, it's just like you do have these players like Null that have been here since whatever, 2018, 2019, and we're still seemingly waiting for them to kind of take the next step or become any sort of regular contributor in the offense. Because I think people also forget that Jesper Horsted played really solid in 2019 in the regular season. I think he started like he played in like 5 or 6 games that year, and he did flash enough potential. But then it's just like there's Ryan All who's just here and is not, really contributing anything, and probably shouldn't even be on the roster moving forward. Because let's just say if a guy like a Khalil Herbert continues to emerge, which is what's going to happen, and then eventually someone like Artavius Pierce hopefully starts getting carries, and Artavius Pierce, I think, can be Damian Williams light because Artavius Pierce does have some burst. You're going to be in a situation where there's just going to be certain players that are left over. There's not roster spots for them. But you mentioned throwing the ball and passing the ball. I think Justin Fields threw it just 17 times in week 4 and 20 times in week 5. I mean, let's be honest. The Bears do need to open up the passing game more because the NFL is such a pass-first league. The Bears are taking it really slow with Justin Fields, which is fine. But the other half of opening it up more is that Justin shown time and time again on the 3rd and 12 to Darnell Mooney yesterday. I mean, the ball was already out before Darnell Mooney had even made his started to run the route and was out of his first break. So I think the Bears need to open it up more simply because Justin's shown that, hey, I can hit these big time throws if you give me an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. On the show about 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that it's very clear and very evident that Justin isn't clicking with the receivers yet. And that's because of a lack of practice. They just haven't spent a lot of time pitching, catching the ball together. Now it's been 2 weeks since that start, and it's starting to click, and it'll just continue to get better. That instant connection of like ripping the ball out, trusting that your guy is going to turn around the exact moment the ball gets to him on a hitch, it worked. First down, game's basically done at that point. 10 more yards, you're into field goal range, or 20 more yards, you're into field goal range, and game is absolutely secured. So that was probably play of the game. That probably won the game, in my opinion. That doesn't happen unless you work together and you work a lot. And we've seen already on Twitter videos of Darnell Mooney and Justin Fields training together, recovering together. That's how you build an elite connection between quarterback and wide receiver, is literally just time, working out together, practicing together. So that's huge. But you're completely right. Matt Nagy, Bill Lazor, whoever Matt Nagy creates the game plan, Lazor calls the plays. Nagy, at the end of the day, is still the reason why Justin Fields is only throwing the ball 20 times, only 17 times. Like, don't get it twisted. It's not Bill Lazor who's going, no, you're only going to run. No. Like, we're going to give Justin like 20 to 25 throws today. That is a conversation that is going on in the offensive locker room. They're going, okay, how many times, where, what do we need to do? Should we progress it? Is this game going well? Should we continue giving him the ball? That is in a game plan. How often are we going to throw the ball? How often are we going to run the ball? It's very clear that they're running the ball more because it's working more than throwing the ball. But I think that eventually throughout this season, and next week might be a perfect week to do it. With Jair Alexander now on IR, the Packers secondary is a little banged up. Might be the perfect week to kind of open it up for Justin, because he showed against the Lions that he has that deep ball accuracy that was advertised. He showed against the Raiders that he has that poise, that toughness, and that clutch gene to make ridiculous plays out of nowhere. So now, as an offensive staff, if I'm in that situation room, I'm going, all right, I'm ready to start opening this up. And if it doesn't work out, give it a quarter, give it 2 quarters. If it's not working out, guess what? I have a run game that I can rely on. But because we have a run game that we can rely on, that should absolutely open up the passing game. Because once they start overloading that box, right, on a 3rd and short, instead of just running it up the gut with Damian Williams, why don't I run a quick play action, hit Darnell Mooney on a streaker down the field, could be wide open, instant touchdown, because I trusted my quarterback to make the right decision. So it's all about trust at the end of the day here. The offensive staff is starting to trust Justin more. Justin is starting to trust his receivers more, and his receivers are starting to trust Justin more. Once that trust increases and builds, you're going to start seeing wins build, which builds more trust. That's the formula for a successful passing game and a successful team.
Yeah, look, I think people don't realize, and let me just say this, there's such a misconception behind a team that is run first, in the sense that teams that traditionally go run first or run heavy, they are doing it to protect the quarterback. Okay. And when I say protect the quarterback, it's just because the quarterback is very limited just as a player overall, that you can't ask him to like really win. I mean, look at the Titans. Ryan Tannehill is a great quarterback. Okay. Is he in that tier of Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen? Hell no. But he's a tier 3 quarterback, and he's good enough for the Tennessee Titans to get it done. But they also have to go run heavy and feed Derrick Henry, because they know Ryan Tannehill's not the guy that's going to elevate the players around him and win the game. The similar thing is going on, right? The Bears are not in that boat though with Justin Fields, because we know Justin has an incredibly high ceiling, and that Ohio State offense, whether you want to, your evaluation of that Ohio State offense, your own evaluation, we're not going to get into it, but that offense was always deep to short. And that's the way offenses are going in the NFL now today, is just more and more explosive plays. I mean, 10 to 15 years ago, if you had a 60 or 70-yard touchdown pass, it was seen as like, oh my God, that's awesome. Now today, those 60, 70-yard touchdown passes are seemingly becoming so routine. I mean, I think there were 80 touchdowns that were scored yesterday alone in the NFL. Okay. And that's just between like the games that took place on Thursday and Sunday, not counting the Monday night one, which is kicking off in 2 hours here. But the reason that I bring it up is because the Bears don't necessarily need to protect Justin. Justin's always better when you just let him cut it loose and let him just go out there and continue to play. He's just a natural playmaker, is what Justin Fields is. And so you do kind of wonder, hey, where would this offense and this offensive philosophy be had Justin gotten consistent reps with the ones in camp? Had he from day one, the Bears not been so focused and Matt Nagy not been so stubborn and stuck in his ways on pretty much only allowing Andy Dalton to get reps, consistent reps with the ones. And now all of a sudden we're seeing more and more is that Justin's way ahead of where he needs to be in terms of chemistry with these guys, and it's continuing to show at an unprecedented rate. Now, the Fields to Mooney connection is great. We're seeing that take over and define this passing game for the Bears. But the other half of it is Fields needs to get more and more comfortable with Allen Robinson and needs to get comfortable quickly, because if the Bears are going to have a lethal passing attack, it's going to be on the heels of Fields being able to connect consistently with Robinson more so than Mooney.
Yeah, I want to put an asterisk next to your statement about teams and running the ball. There's a quarterback over in Baltimore that's an elite quarterback, an MVP, that actually has only thrown the ball 2 more times than the Chicago Bears have this entire year. So the Ravens rely heavy on their running game because what does it do? It literally opens up the passing game for Lamar Jackson and allows him to do whatever he wants. Now, the difficulty is like, was it a design run for Lamar or is he taking it off? So that might, pad the stats a little bit, but that's something that you have to start noticing. And maybe that's what the Bears are emulating, because Lamar Jackson has a lot of skill sets comparable to Justin Fields. But you also said something that started making me thinking. If they're not playing Justin to his strengths, if they're keeping him in the pocket, if they're not letting him rip the ball downfield unless he decides to do it because there's a crosser and he wants to take take the chance. If they're starting to teach him to play short to deep, because he came in wanting to play deep to short. We saw that his first week he was looking for the big play and now he's starting to look for the under. Is this Matt Nagy training Justin Fields to be the guy that he always wanted? Is this Justin turning into that game manager? Because what did they do yesterday? They started managing the game when there was 10 minutes left on the clock. When they started just running the ball and doing really short passing plays, they said, all right, Justin, you have the lead. Manage the game. And he did it. He did it incredibly well. He didn't give the Raiders an opportunity to come back, and the defense stepped in and played complimentary football like Matt Nagy said. So this is something I want to start watching for the rest of the year is Matt Nagy treating Justin Fields as a dynamic dual threat quarterback or a smart field general game manager? Because we've been saying this for years that Matt Nagy's looking for his new Alex Smith. Justin Fields is better, has a higher ceiling than Alex Smith ever did. But is he starting to take on that game manager role? That's a question I think that we need to start looking at throughout the season.
Well, and let me say this about Lamar Jackson. I mean, whatever your pre-draft narratives in 2018 about Lamar Jackson, where you can toss those out the window, because Lamar has consistently proven he's doing things at a high level. But we also have to keep something in mind is that the Ravens execute so well that their running game seemingly clicked. Their running game clicks so well each week. It's almost like they can afford to run the football. Now, when Lamar Jackson's asked to take over and basically be the guy and get it done through the air, you do see times where he struggles. There's times where I was watching the Ravens heavily throughout last season in 2020, and it was just like, okay, when teams with good pass rushes were getting after Lamar Jackson on passing downs, you could tell Lamar Jackson was getting incredibly frustrated. So it's just like the Ravens formula, it's like it works until it doesn't work. And in a pass-first league, if you're an elite quarterback, well, guess what? You better be able to pass the ball and do so with consistency. Now, talking about game manager versus dual threat quarterback, look, you need to basically run the dual threat here. You need to lean towards dual threat here, not game manager, because game manager is a term that's just used for guys that are good but not good enough. Like Andy Dalton, okay, to start his career, went to I think 3 consecutive Pro Bowls, and I think had 5 consecutive winning seasons and made the playoffs 3 out of those 5 years. And somewhere in there was a 12-4 year where the Bengals shocked everyone and won the division after starting off like 8-0 or something. Okay, it happened one of those years. But Andy Dalton's a game manager. That's what Andy Dalton is. Justin Fields is not a game manager. There's two types of quarterbacks in this league, and I spoke to Mark Schofield about this, who writes for USA Today. Mark and I follow each other on Twitter, by the way, because that's just what happens on Twitter. Is the smart football minds follow each other. So Mark said this, and it really stuck out to me that there's two types of quarterbacks in the NFL. There's ones you win games with and ones you win games because of. And Justin's shown time and time again in his college career, I'm the quarterback you win a game because of. You don't necessarily win games with. All right, winning games with would be an example of like a Ryan Tannehill, okay? But winning games because of is because that quarterback is making the entire team around you better, and that's what Justin Fields is doing.
Yeah, so thus far haven't seen that. We've seen games win with, but hopefully down the line, Justin Fields is able to bring that college ability into the NFL and translate into the quarterback that you win games because of. Absolutely, that's a great analogy or great euphemism. There you go. But sure, so that's definitely something we need to watch going forward. Is how is Matt Nagy? How is this offense treating Justin Fields? Are they trying to transform him into something that they want rather than something that Justin wants? Because that's what happened to Mitchell. That's just what happened to Mitch. They weren't letting Mitch play the way that Mitch wanted to play. It didn't work out too well. But before we head out of here, last little blurb. As of right now, heading into week 6, Bears are 3-2. Are they knocking on the door of becoming a playoff team?
So this is an incredibly tough question because as I pull up the Bears 2021 schedule here, I'm not going to say it's too early in the season to tell, but then I also think that this is an incredibly tough and gritty team. And okay, while it may always not be pretty, it's just like this is the Chicago winning ugly is basically the Chicago Bears formula. I understand everyone's frolicking out there and has their head in the clouds and saying, "Oh, it's not a big deal. Well, it works." Well, guess what? It's proven to work against bad or average teams so far. Against the good teams, it really hasn't worked, but the Bears are slowly finding their identity. Now, I certainly do think, hey, there is enough. The real question and the real path to the playoffs starts this Sunday against Green Bay, because when we look at this you look at this schedule right now. I mean, okay, you lost to Los Angeles. Well, guess what? Cincinnati, Cleveland, they don't really matter because they're in the AFC, so they're not going to have a major impact on playoff seeding besides your win-loss record, but you could say that for any team around the league. Okay, Detroit, a team that we knew the Bears should be beating anyway, and Detroit's not making the playoffs. I think it's like if they lose 3 more games, the Lions will be the first team out of playoff contention. Okay, Vegas doesn't really matter. The 3 games that stick out to me are Green Bay, Tampa Bay, and San Francisco. Can you come out of this 3-game stretch with at least 2 wins, have an upper hand on the Buccaneers as well as Green Bay in terms of both the conference race as well as the division race? San Francisco is another incredibly tough opponent. And then really you look at the second half of the season here. I mean, from November 25th, which is Bears, Lions in Detroit on Thanksgiving, to January 9th, that's like 7 straight NFC teams right there. You're playing in that stretch. You've got Arizona, you have Green Bay, you have Minnesota, the Giants are in there. Seattle's an NFC team that's in there. And so ultimately, are the Bears a playoff team? Yeah, I would say yes, they are right now. But 2 things to keep in mind. One, there's still an incredibly long way to go. And number 2, we also have to factor this in, is that this is not a playoff team right now that if the playoffs started today would be playing with home field advantage. This is a lower end playoff team that would get into the playoffs, would make it a fight, but also would really continue to struggle and probably be out in the wild card round.
Right. Absolutely. I completely agree with on the Buccaneers because obviously they're going to be winning their division here. The Panthers' wheels have kind of started falling off. We'll see if that continues or not. The Saints, I don't really see them as a real threat this year. Their defense is stacked. Their running game's still working, but I don't know if Jameis can lead the way. So the really only wild card contentions at the moment right now that I'm looking at are the 49ers, potentially the Rams. The Rams and Cardinals fight are going to come down to the wire. Cardinals are obviously undefeated right now, but the Rams are clipping at their heels. There is not a lot of room for error in this wild card race this year because the NFC is kind of stacked at the moment. So it's crucial that not only the Bears win out the division, but it's crucial that you're completely right. They win against the 49ers, or they stun the Cardinals at home, or they totally, I think that they can beat the Seahawks team. But when you look at the NFC West, they're kind of banged up at the moment. 49ers are pretty much hurt. The Packers are pretty much hurt on the defensive side of the ball. The Buccaneers are really hurt on the defensive side of the ball. Absolutely hate to see this because these are all really good teams that are on the verge of becoming Super Bowl contenders. The Packers still have that juice. If they still could do it. I hate to see it, but they still could do it. So this is a tough question down the line. I think there is a way to squeak this out. I really do. I think that they could do it if they really, with the roster that they have, the talent that they have, and just luck of the draw, down the line, I think that there's a definite possibility for the Bears to become a playoff team. The New York Giants are absolutely going to hate that. And I swear to God, if it comes down to January 2nd, week, 17 now, then if it comes down to that game and if the Giants knock us out of the playoffs, that'll be hilarious. I'll absolutely hate it. But they get their, 2 or 1 pick higher in the first round than what they originally were going to get. But at the end of the day, I think this Bears team could make the playoffs. Will they make the playoffs? It's a different conversation. But I think that they could make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting to watch. And the Bears playing the Giants is going to be interesting because our friends over at Fireside Giants continue to think and assume that the Bears are going to be giving them a top 5 pick, and they were so psyched up. I think early returns right now are that the Bears are clearly winning that draft day trade between the Giants and Bears for Justin Fields, because it's like, look, and we'll get into this later as we wrap up here because we've been on this thing for about 43 minutes now. I'm just going to say this. I mean, the Bears get their franchise quarterback of the future in basically the second best quarterback in this class, whereas the Giants only get an extra first round pick to do what? Use on possibly a quarterback with a really weak quarterback class coming up. So it is going to be fun to watch moving forward here. But make sure you're following us, guys, on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Follow myself and Max on Twitter at Usayd Kosho and at Max Smith ESM. It's raining here like it is in Florida, so we're going to get out of this place. We'll catch you guys next week, or on Thursday, I should say, when we're doing our Bears-Packers preview. But bear down and enjoy the rest of the week, guys. And don't forget to watch the White Sox in the playoffs.
Go Sky.